Welcome and thank you for standing by. For today's webinar, all attendees will be in a listen-only mode for the duration of the webinar. This session is being recorded and will be posted publicly. If you have any objections, you may disconnect at this time. Now I'd like to turn the session over to Matt Spence. Matt, you may begin.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, good morning to our friends who are joining us perhaps from Alaska or Hawaii. I am Matt Spence. I am in the Population Division of the U.S. Census Bureau, and I'm going to talk to you today about the 2020 Census Privacy Protected Microdata File, or PPMF for short. So what is the PPMF? Well, the PPMF we just released yesterday, August 5th, 2024, is available on our FTP website, and we'll get you details on how to access that data in a bit. But the PPMF makes available the privacy-protected individual records, or microdata, that were used to produce the published tables that make up the redistricting data file, the demographic and housing characteristics file, DHC, and the demographic profile. And so data users can tabulate the data, tabulate these individual records at lower levels of geography or using custom tabulations or cross tabulations that might not have been available in the previously published tables. If anyone has any questions, please feel free to use the Q&A feature in the WebEx interface. We will either answer it via text or we can read it out loud. One of my colleagues will read it and we can discuss it verbally. So, again, these are individual records. So you can imagine, one row, like in a spreadsheet, sort of one row per person or one row per housing unit. And that gets to be very, very powerful because you can use it to create new tabulations and at new geographies that were not available in the prior publications. So what kind of content is available? Well, so we've got two columns here. One thing to note that I'll just put up front is that there are two different files that make up the PPMF. One of which is the person file. So the person file has all of the individual person level data, things like sex, age, Hispanic origin, race, relationship to householder, and if they live in a group quarters, what type, detailed type of group quarters, and then finally an indicator for whether the person is living alone. So those are all the person level data. That's in the person table. We also have a housing unit or housing household file. That includes all sorts of data about various housing units. So tenure, whether you own or rent your house. Vacancy status, if the house is vacant, why is it vacant? Is it vacant for seasonal reasons? Is it vacant for rent? We have things like household family type. We also have new variables like household family type that include cohabitation status. We have presence and type of unmarried partner households. We have couple type, so what sort of couple. We have things like household size, how many individuals live in this particular household. We have an indicator for multi-generational households. So this might be, grandparents living with parents living with children. We have various characteristics about the householder, including sex, age, Hispanic origin, and race of the householder. And then we have a variety of indicators for who lives in the household. We have presence of age of own children under 18. So you can identify, for example, households that have own children under the age of 6, or households that have own children between the ages of 6 and 18. We also have presence and age of children in general, not just own children. Own children are children of the householder, but this, presence and age of children are any children in the household. And then, finally, we have indicators for just whether someone of this age lives in the household at all. Whether someone lives who's under 18 is in the household, whether someone's 60 and over, 65 and over, and 75 and over. And so this really is extremely powerful to be able to get a deep dive into the data and perhaps look at relationships among these variables. Now, what kind of geographies are available? I've got, again, 2 columns, but unlike before, both of these columns of geographies are available in both files. So all of these geographies are available in both the person file and the housing unit file. The reason that I've got them separated into 2 columns is because the columns on the right are the standard sort of census geographies you might be very familiar with. Things like region, west, south, things like division, state, state of residence, everybody knows, county. Within county, we have things called census tracts, which are sort of neighborhood level geographies that typically encompass a few thousand, ideally targeting about 4,000 people at the tract level. Within tracts, we have block groups, which can be very small groupings of census blocks. And then finally, we have census block. So those are sometimes called the geographic spine. And those have had sort of accuracy targeted for those. We'll talk more about what that means, accuracy targeted for that. But just know that those are the sort of standard census geographies that a lot of people are familiar with. But the file also includes a variety of other crossing geographies as well. Things like American Indian Area, Alaska Native Area, and Hawaiian Homeland. Things like Alaska Native Regional Corporation. Things like Combined Statistical Area, Congressional District, New England City and Town Area, place, which is basically cities and towns, incorporated places, or even census designated places, voting districts, state legislative districts, and zip code tabulation areas, or ZICTAs. So there are and this is actually not exhaustive. This is just a selected view of geographies that are available on both the person file and the housing unit file for the PPMF. So with these geographies and with those content variables that we showed on the prior slide, you're able to do custom tabulations at geographies that may not have been previously available. Now, I said that the person level file is 1 row per person, and I said that the housing unit file is 1 row for every housing unit. But the records are not actual census responses. They may look like census responses, but they're not actual census responses. These data have gone through the full 2020 Census Disclosure Avoidance System, or DAS for short. We have a wide variety of materials about what the DAS is and how it works, but I'm going to turn your attention to just this one particular brief, which is called Disclosure Avoidance and the 2020 Census, how the top-down algorithm works. I've got a little preview of it here on the bottom right. This is one of a series of briefs that we did to explain how this process worked. It's different from prior censuses, but we believe it gives the best representation of confidentiality protections and accuracy of the data and usefulness of the data. So the basic process is highlighted in this sort of flow diagram in the middle. We start with microdata, actual census response microdata. These data have been cleaned up and edited for consistency. Missing values have been imputed. We also then join that with our tabulation geographic reference file, sometimes called a GRF or GRFC. That is a crosswalk between individual census blocks and all of those other geographies I saw. So which zip code is this block in? Which zip code is that block in? Which voting district is that block in? Then from those private, protected actual census responses, we convert to tabular counts. We call those a histogram, but those are essentially everything you want to know from the 2020 census. How many 5-year-olds are there in Los Angeles County, California? How many are there in Wisconsin? Every single characteristic at all of those different geographies that make up the spine are converted into this count of tabular data. We then add noise to these tabulated counts. So what do we mean by noise? It's small bits of additions or subtractions. In my tract at home, there might be 100, male 5-year-olds. And after the infusion of noise, maybe we'll say, okay, there are 101, males, or 102. Or maybe we'll say there are 99 5-year-old males in my tract. So after that, you get noisy measurements, and noise is added, infused individually and separately for each one of these tabular counts of the histogram. Then we go through something called post-processing. We've called it the top-down algorithm. The top-down algorithm is really a phenomenal process where all of these noisy measurements can be inconsistent. And in fact, frequently they can be negative, because if you think about it, a lot of counts are zero. Like, how many 110-year-olds are there in my block? There's zero. I just, and so after noise, maybe noise will turn that into -1 or -2. But with the post-processing will bring that back to zero, get that a little bit more consistent, remove negative numbers, create consistency among geographies. So if you add up all of the 5-year-olds in my tract and all of my neighboring tracts in a county, that will equal the number of 5-year-olds in the county. So that is happens during the post-processing step. And during this post-processing step, we're also converting these noise-infused tables to microdata. And those microdata are basically synthetic records, if you really want to get into the details. But again, it looks like 1 row per person, and in a separate file, 1 row per housing unit. And that is what we call the MDF. And then finally, we add on those geographies again to provide the most user friendliness for individuals who might want to do tabulations for, like, for example, voting districts or zip code tabulation areas, or, American Indian areas or something like that. So that's the basic process. And the reason I'm highlighting this is because, there's a question of like, well, what is this PPMF? Is it consistent with, the tabulations? What are these noisy measurements? And so really you can think of sort of 3 main items I'm talking about today, 3 main data products. The first one on the far left are the official 2020 census redistricting and DHC tabulations. Those are available. Those were released a few years ago, and those are the official, underlined, 2020 census statistics. Those have great deal of accuracy due to the top-down algorithm. They have additional accuracy relative to the noisy measurement files on the right. But due to that post-processing, and we're not going to get into the details here, that does include a little bit of bias. If you'd like to know more about what this bias means, please do read that brief I linked to in the prior slide about the top-down algorithm. Now, I'm going to skip, I'm going to move to the middle column now, which is the 2020 Census PPMF. That's what we're talking about today. These are 100% microdata files. Those are 100% consistent with the published tabulations. So again, if you take the PPMF and you sum up, again, the number of 5-year-old males in Maryland, you're going to match the count of 5-year-old males in Maryland on data.census.gov that were part of the DHC tabulations. So why would you use the PPMF? You might use it for special tabulations, custom cross tabulations, microdata analysis, anything that might want to look at relationships among variables that are not supported in the already published data. So finally, we'll talk about the thing on the right. This comes in the middle of the process. Remember, we get those counts, those tabular counts, and then we add noise to them. Those end up being inconsistent, and they can be negative, and they're not very user-friendly. They're not very intuitive, and they don't match the official 2020 census statistics generally, and they don't match the PPMF. But why would you want to look at them? Well, we really kind of intend these as a research product. These are for people who would like to produce unbiased estimates and confidence intervals that do not utilize the post-processing of the top-down algorithm. You can actually use this if you're really into creating your own version of post-processing that might rival or beat the top-down algorithm. That's where you might look at the noisy measurement files. So those noisy measurement files are extremely large, even bigger than the PPMF data, and they're hosted on a variety of sites. The census website includes pointers to various places that you can get them, including things like the Harvard Dataverse and AWS. So we've been talking about the PPMF as very useful for doing your own kind of analysis, custom tabulations, regression analysis, things like that. But what are some cautions? What are some potential limitations? Well, one thing I've mentioned already is that there's a housing unit file and a person file and a housing unit file. And these two had noise infused individually, and they were post-processed separately. Now, because of that, those two files cannot be linked. You do not have the ability to put the persons in the person file into housing units or link them. You can't say, okay, person A here in this file is part of housing unit 2, which is headed by an Asian alone householder or something like that. You cannot link those two in any way. You can, of course, say, okay, let's tabulate the person file, let's tabulate the housing unit file, maybe at the block level or some other geography, and look and see sort of small spatial relationships, but you'll never be able to put the people into the housing units. You'll never be able to associate the housing units with the people. So that's the first bullet point. The second bullet point is a little bit tricky to understand, but basically what you need to know is that in that process of the top-down algorithm, we did many different things to test our data, to really make sure that we were doing the post-processing in the least biased way that would generate the most amount of accuracy. We tried infusing noise in different ways with different distributions. And what we ended up with for the production 2020 census disclosure avoidance system was tuned and tested and optimized to perform best for the officially published redistricting, DHC, and demographic tabulations. Those are the primary use cases for the 2020 census for this product. And so we made sure that the disclosure avoidance would target accuracy there. Sort of the implicit statement on this is that if you were looking at cross tabulations that were not part of these official products, or if you're looking at geographies that were available at lower levels of geography, they may not have been tuned and they may not have been looked at for demographic reasonableness. They may not have that accuracy. So you'll need to use caution when doing that. Now, because of this testing and tuning, and because the PPMF, again, so the PPMF are, again, think of a giant Excel spreadsheet where every row is a person. And we're going to take a look at this in a little bit. But imagine every row is a person, and then every column is information about that person. Well, we can use that microdata file to do our various tabulations. Say I wanted to, again, tabulate the number of, males who are 5-year-olds for Maryland. Well, I'd say, okay, first grab me the state 24, Maryland, get me Q-sex, that's male, and get me age, QH, that's 5. And then I would shrink down, filter all of those 330 million records down to a smaller number. And that number, that count of records, is how many 5-year-old males there are in Maryland. And that's how we did our tabulations that are available on data.census.gov and available in the API. So that means that the PPMF and the official tabulations are 100% consistent there. Anything that's on data.census.gov that's part of the redistricting file, the DHC and the demographic profile will match exactly the tabulation from the PPMF. This is actually a really nice thing because you can use it to check your code and make sure you did it correctly. If it doesn't match, reach out to us and we'll see if we can figure out probably something. It was a little funny. So, all right. And but again, if you are looking at things that were not part of the data.census.gov, so imagine that you were really interested in the number of 5-year-old males in group quarters at the census block level. Well, that's not in our official tabulations. That's not part of the redistricting, the DHC, or the demographic profile. We don't publish data for individual age by sex for GQs at the census block level, right? I can just tell you. You can do that calculation using the PPMF, but we strongly caution that you should exercise caution. We strongly warn that you should exercise caution when creating those custom tabulations, because again, the DAS was not tuned for that. There may be large inaccuracies due to the noise infusion, and those numbers have not been reviewed for demographic reasonableness. Okay, the final caution is that we just released something called the detailed DHCB, and earlier in the cycle, a bit last year, we released the detailed DHCA. Those are information about detailed race and ethnicity responses. Things like, how many people, how many Mexican people live in my state? How many Jamaican people live in my county? Those are not available on the 2020 PPMF. Those detailed race and ethnicity responses were protected using different methods. Again, I encourage you to go look at the census briefs. I've got a link to those here. We have a variety of information about these detailed race and ethnicity data. The one that we most recently released was this middle one here, who lives in homes they own. And that's got home ownership by detailed race. It's very exciting. But a wide variety of America Count stories, as well as some technical documents that will show you how to get the detailed race data. But these data are not available on the 2020 PPMF. I'm going to pause here because I think I see some questions that require a verbal answer. If anyone wants to stop, I'll stop. Okay, great. I see a few. Okay, so one question is, does place have an indicator for incorporated places? Great question. I believe there is something called Place FS, which is an indicator for whether it's a statistical place or an incorporated place. That should be very useful there. Does adding noise ever create a negative value, such as -1 10-year-olds on the block? So that's Patrick's question. Let me actually go back for this question. So, here in the noisy measurements part, you can end up with negative numbers. So adding noise does occasionally create negative numbers. I mean, you're saying -1 10-year-olds. What about 110-year-olds? People are 110 years old. There aren't that many nationwide, and we have millions of census blocks. So most census blocks have 0 110-year-olds. And due to the way the noise is added, noise is symmetrical, centered around 0. So you're equally likely to get a negative number as well as a positive number for noise. You're equally likely to have to subtract as you are as to add. So because of that, a lot of those zeros can turn into negative numbers, and that will happen in the noisy measurements. But this post-processing, that's the top-down algorithm, will remove those negative numbers. It will adjust those negative numbers up to 0 or potentially 1 or 2, but it will make those negative numbers go away. And it still makes everything add up across geographies and within tables as well. So if you have to add up like males plus females, it equals the total population. So that's a very nice feature of the top-down algorithm. So going forward these two on the left, both the official census tabulations on data.census.gov, as well as the 2020 census PPMF that we're talking about today, both of those products do not have negative numbers. They have gone through the post-processing. But the one over here on the right, that will potentially, frequently have negative numbers for certain noisy measurements. Okay. Great question. How does the PPMF differ from the PUMS? All right, this is great. So PUMS, a lot of people, when they think about PUMS, public use microdata sample, PUMS, is the American, a lot of people think of the American Community Survey. The American Community Survey puts out a public use microdata sample. But did you know that the 2010 census also put out a PUMS? Yeah, same with 2000. So we have a long history of putting out public use microdata samples or PUMS files. 2020 is the 2020 census PPMF is actually the successor to the 2010 census PUMS. And so we're going to walk through the two differences here. We've got the 2010 PUMS on the left, and we've got the 2020 PPMF on the right. So first thing, the 2010 PUMS, the PUMS is, as the S is sample. So it's a 10% sample. So you get about 30 million records out of 300 million for people, and you get about 13 million housing units for the housing unit side. The PPMF, on the other hand, is 100% coverage. You actually have 334 million people for the US and Puerto Rico, and you have 142 million housing units. And again, so we've got it for the US and Puerto Rico as well. So those are really, really nice to have the full amount of coverage. On the left, for the second column, or the second row, I should say, the PUMS only tabulates to public use microdata areas, which contain no fewer than 100,000 people. These are frequently, based at the county level, or they can be pieces of counties, but they are geographic aggregates. They're not available all the way down to the census block like the PPMF. The PPMF is available all the way down to the census block, so you can create unique tabulations down there. Third row, the PUMS, the 2010 PUMS includes error from sampling. That's, again, the S in PUMS is sample. So there is some sampling error. And on the right, the 2020 PPMF does not include error from sampling. So that's a very nice bit. It is the full bit of information, the full microdata file that was used to create the tabulations. Now, this middle column here, this middle row here, that's pretty big. We're going to go through this. Both of these files include disclosure avoidance error. They include noise from disclosure avoidance. What do we mean by that? Both have gone through some manipulation of the data to ensure that there are no way to go back and identify individual census responses, individual respondents. We wanted to protect respondent confidentiality as per our obligations in Title 13. And so the left one included things like swapping, top and bottom coding, and geographic aggregation, such as having it only available to the public use microdata area, category collapsing, so we did not, for example, allow the full amount of detail, and the data synthesis for group quarters populations. Those obscure individual records, but one thing that's very important is that in 2010 PUMS, those sought to preserve relationships among variables. Swapping in general means picking up a housing unit and all the people in that housing unit and plopping it into a different area, and then doing the reverse to kind of counteract for its missingness. That tries to account for some relationships among variables, but of course it does create noise that's harder to quantify and potentially could lead to some weird geographic results. On the right, the 2020 PPMF includes error from disclosure avoidance, and that's that differentially private noise infusion. Noise is added individually for each tabulation, each one of those tabular counts in that histogram. And we do post-processing to ensure consistency, but there might be some blurred relationships among variables. So you'll want to exercise caution there. All right, second to last row. One is that in the 2010 PUMs, you can link persons and households. There is an indicator, MAF-ID, where you can locate people within their household or their housing unit. And again, as we mentioned, for the 2020 PPMF, noise and processing were done separately for the person and housing unit files, so you cannot link those two. And then the final bit is that both files include some limitations on how much detail there are. The PUMs restricted data to characteristics for which the national population was at least 10,000 persons. So you could, for example, get counts of people who are Mexican or English. Perhaps actually not English, because English we did not have that in 2010. This is new for 2020, very exciting. But Asian Indian, for example, that is a detailed race that was available in the 2010 PUMs. You are able to get to that. We do not have that detailed race in the 2020 PPMF. We only have major race groups like white, Black or African American, Asian, American Indian, Alaska Native, etc. Again, that said, the PUMs did restrict that detail for only the largest populations, and it did not include white and Black detailed groups because of the limitations of the questionnaire at the time. Okay, so I'm going to pause here before we go, just to quickly look back at the Q&A. Can we talk about the level of accuracy in PUMs versus PPMF? This is challenging because, so I'm going to go back to the difference. Talk about the level of accuracy in PUMs versus PPMF. This is something that we struggled with when we were developing the 2020 DAS. We actually had a very long and I think pretty open process where we went through why the 2010 protections were not sufficient, what we sort of thought about designing a disclosure avoidance system for 2020 using differential privacy. We released several demonstration files that actually look a lot like a PPMF that had noise infused and post-processing. And we did that on the 2010 data to allow people to be able to kind of compare how much error there was as a result of the disclosure avoidance system. So again, we applied the 2020 style differential private noise to 2010 data and publicly released the results as part of our process to do research and outreach and education for data users about how we're going to protect data for 2020. And one thing we saw was that, the nice thing about differential privacy is the noise is quantifiable. We know how much noise is added during that noisy measurement stage. We can call that rho, or we can call that a privacy loss budget. We also know that the amount of error, the accuracy increases significantly. The amount of error declines significantly during that post-processing. In general, the post-process data are a lot closer to the private enumerated counts than the noisy measurements. But we do know that this post-processing does introduce small amounts of error, in particular for smaller counts. And again, you can think about that because if you're having to adjust a lot of negative numbers up, that kind of will lead to a small positive bias for those counts that are likely to get to be negative numbers. So that is, unfortunate. But the 2010 data are not without error. There was a lot of swapping, and there was also, as we say, top and bottom coding, aggregation, collapsing of categories, and GQ data were fully synthetic. So a sort of similar process to this sort of top-down algorithm where you kind of create synthetic individuals. And these parameters can't be released, the parameters for swapping, how much swapping there was, what kind of error to expect, because it would sort of, if we revealed that, that would compromise the integrity of the swapping. That would potentially compromise the confidentiality protections. And so it's difficult to sort of say, how much error does one have versus the other? Because again, it really depends on, what geography you're looking at, what, what variable you might be looking at. Age might be noisier in one file, but race might be noisier in a different file. But again, we have done our best to minimize the amount of error, to increase the amount of accuracy for the 2020 PPMF. And we believe that this is the best amount of error that still protects respondent confidentiality. Great, okay. One question is, will the PPMF aggregations match census aggregations at all levels of geography? Yes, at all levels of geography that are available, they will match. So quickly going back, if you, for example, wanted to look at the consolidated city of Louisville, and you wanted to calculate the number of people in Louisville, if you, calculated that from the PPMF, and if you calculated that on data.census.gov, if you, looked it up on data.census.gov or on our API, those will match. At every level that we publish, those will match. So that's a very nice thing. The other nice thing is that because of the way the top-down algorithm works is, again, if you perhaps on data.census.gov, you'll have tract level data, but you won't have census block. Well, if you want to use the PPMF to look up the block level data and you add up all the blocks, you'll get the tract count. Those will be consistent across geography levels as well. So, or another way of thinking it is like if we have the county number published on data.census.gov, but you need tract level data, you can calculate all the tracts. Say there are 10 tracts in the county. 10 tracts, sum those up, that will equal the county number. So that will match. Okay. So currently the FTP server is the only place to get the privacy protected microdata file. These are large files. They are 6.9 gigabytes. So it might take a little while to download. If you have, even if you have high-speed internet, it might take a while to download. You'll download the zipped file, which like I said, was 6.9 gigabytes. That contains two data files. It contains a person file labeled as 2020 PPMF person.csv and the housing unit file 2020 PPMF unit CSV. These individual files, once you unzip them, are extremely large. 50 gigabytes for the housing unit file, 116 gigabytes for the person file. Too big to open in Excel. Sorry, sorry Excel, you're too limited for us. I do like a good Excel session, but it's not going to really work in Excel. So what do we recommend people do? We recommend using statistical processing software, and potentially you might want to use like a cloud sort of computing instance, or otherwise trying to sort of trim down, filter the file as you're reading it in. There are various R and Python libraries that will allow you to intake, subset the data as it's being read in, or process it in chunks and in batches, so that way you can do it and all fit it in your computer's memory. We're doing some research on how can we make it a little bit more user-friendly, but at this point, this is what we have. So right now, I'm going to show you what these data look like. So I've gone ahead and used SAS, which is a computer statistical processing software, to open up these comma-separated value, these CSV files, and I've converted them to SAS just so that we can go ahead and look at them. And you can see here there are 334,735,155 rows for the person file. I just called it PPMFP. I just named it myself. That's not what it's named in the official file, but this is what I called it. You can see here we've got different variables that kind of give information about the individuals in question. But again, as we were talking about, these are not actual census responses. These have gone through those privacy protections. But if you sort of wanted to take a look, you can see that this person here, EP number 0, privacy person protected number 0, has a RELSHIP of 27, QSEX of 1, QH of 17. Okay, so we can kind of know what that means. They're 17 years old. CEN-HISP of 1, CEN-RACE of 01. They don't live alone, and they have 1 race. Okay, that's the number of races. And if we scroll over, we could see a variety of information about where they live. So they live in this. Why can I not make this bigger? Oh man, I'm sorry. I wanted to make these a little bit bigger. This is tab block state. This is tab block county, tract block. And then we have, again, information about these. So you might be thinking like, well, this is how do I understand what all these are? Well, if you go to the Census Bureau FTP website and control click it, which might work. Just a second. Let me pause sharing and see if I can get this to work. Okay. There we go. I will resume sharing. Okay. So this is what I hope everyone can see. This is what the FTP site looks like. We'll have the 2020 ppmf.zip, which is again 6.9 gigabytes, and we have a README file, which gives a little bit more detail. So if we click on the README file, that describes what the PPMF is, and it also has a link to the full technical documentation. This full technical documentation is extremely useful for looking up information about what these data mean. This chapter 3 includes a lot of information. It's a data dictionary or a record layout, you might call it, to understand what is RELSHIP 27. What does that even mean? We also have a variety of information about the confidentiality of the data and user nodes. But if you click on section 3, you can go down and see what these variable names are. EP num, what size it is, what type it is, numeric. What does it mean? Person number, record type. Okay, that means whether that person 3 is housing unit and 5 is group quarters. So if I go back to here, I scroll back over, I can see, okay, R type 3, that means that this person's in a housing unit. Great. And GQ type is the next one, the next variable. And you can see 000, not in universe, i.e. housing unit. And you can say, oh yeah, great, 000, 3 zeros, they're in housing unit, not a GQ. And then finally, you scroll down, what is 27? Oh, this person is a stepson or stepdaughter. That's what 27 means for RELSHIP. And you can see here, RELSHIP 27. Great. So likewise, you can do the same thing for the unit file. Again, the unit file is just going to be a little bit further down in this data dictionary. Here's the housing unit. And here we've got record type. Here we call we don't use 3 and 5. We use 2 and 4. Just so everyone kind of remembers. Oh, I'm looking at housing units, not people in housing units or people in GQs. So housing unit 2. So you could say, okay, now we're on the unit file. R type 2. This is a housing unit. 000 GQ type makes sense. Scroll down a little bit. Tenure or TEN is the next one. And this person has 10-3, which means that they rent. This housing unit is rented. And you can see vacancy status, VAX is 0. And that's because it's rented. And so that means it's not in the universe for vacancy. It's not vacant. So it's NA for this vacancy status. So that's a little bit about how you might, sort of look at these data, how you might use the documentation, sort of hand in glove with these data. We're very excited to release these. Again, this is a successor to the 2010 PUMS and has a variety of great things to recommend it, including full geographic detail and 334 million or 140 plus million records for the person or housing unit file. Let me quickly go back to the Q&A. Let's see. All right. So a couple questions. So yes, there are several questions to divide the PPMF into state level files. That is a great idea. I think we are researching how we might be able to do that. I do think we will. I see Cynthia Hollingsworth is starting to answer some of these questions. She says, we will likely post files by state for easier download. So great. I'm just going to say it. Yeah, we'll do that. That sounds great. We acknowledge that these are extremely large files, and CSV is a universal system, but is not necessarily the easiest for a statistical processing system to input. So, we'll filter it by state. So we'll do individual states. That way you can just look for your particular state. Great. All right, looks like a couple of questions about that. Oh, and one thing, so going back to Jim's question back at 311, if you scroll down, so we were showing the person variables, we were showing the housing unit variables. You can see all kinds of great variables, the housing unit file. If you keep going down, you'll get to geographies. So geographies are all of the geographic variables. These geographies are available on both the person file and the housing unit file. So you can both, tablock state will be on both, for example. Tabulation state will be on both person and housing unit. All of these will be on both. So you can see here, these are the tabulation state. These are the FIPS codes, including Puerto Rico. Tabulation county is right there, tab block cow. Census tract, block number, which is tab block. Block group, American Indian area, Alaska Native area, Hawaiian homeland, etc. Lots of great data available. Let's go down. We're going to go down to place. So here's place. Place is place there. So it's a 5-digit number, and place does not go across state line. This is actually something that's kind of important. If you want to uniquely identify places, you'll need to put both the FIPS state code and the 5-digit place code together. You want to concatenate the two. That will uniquely identify the places across the US. If you just look at place, it's duplicative across states. It's not unique across the whole country. It's only unique within the state. So if you put the state FIPS code, 2 digits, plus the 5-digit place code, that will allow you to uniquely identify places across the US. And we have place functional status. So we've got various letters here. A is an active government unit providing general purpose functions, so that is incorporated place. We have active government that's partially consolidated. We have F, which is a fictitious entity. I don't know that we have many of those for place, but maybe we do. We have inactive government units and non-functional legal entities and statistical entity. Statistical entity, or S, are those census designated places. So, if you, live in an unincorporated part of your county, you might be part of a census designated place because that is a nice sort of boundary that we've got that comports with like sort of local knowledge and local boundaries that kind of gives us a nice little neighborhood or a feel, even though it might not technically be an incorporated place. And then finally, 9 would be not in a place. So there are places in this country that are not places. That's funny. But yeah, but there are people who live outside of an incorporated place or a census designated place. So that is the best place to learn about place. All right, let's see. Any other questions? All right, so I see several questions about the state. I see Michael Hawes answered a great question about, is there work being done to allow person and household file linkage and subsequent PPMF data for 2030 and beyond? Michael said, we are currently finalizing our disclosure avoidance research agenda for the 2030 census. We should have more to share on these research plans in the near future. So that is the best answer to that. You know, that research is ongoing. And so that's very exciting. All right. Can we access the 2020 census PPMF in R using Tidy Census? I believe Tidy Census currently uses the API, or Application Programming Interface. The PPMF files are not on the API. However, I do know that the Tidy Census author has incorporated certain files that aren't on the API, such as like the estimates, the census estimates, in Tidy Census. So perhaps that will be, but I'm not the author of the Tidy Census package, so I don't know if there are plans for that. Okay. I think this is good. So the last little bit that I'll just sort of go back to our slideshow, and I'll just say the last thing I'll leave you with is these files are quite large. I believe that if you have high-speed internet, it will download eventually. There may be some fits and starts with our census server or our census firewall, so please be patient. I do try it again. You will be able to download it, and do be patient. These are really big files, but they're very exciting, and I think that it could be very useful for researchers or data users who would like to get a closer look at the data. So I'm going to stop there, and I think we've been able to answer questions here. One question, are there any value markers for unhoused individuals in the records? So let me go back to our thing here. Okay, so people who don't live in housing units would be considered part of the group quarters population. And that would include people who are unhoused, the unhoused population. So let's see. So here we have a variety of operations that target individuals who don't live in housing units or sort of traditional brick and mortar GQs. One of them is, we have an operation that targets soup kitchens. We have another one that targets regularly scheduled mobile food vans. And then we also have one that targets that's targeted non-sheltered outdoor locations, or TNSOLs, or tonsils, depending on how you like to pronounce it, but TNSOL, temporary targeted non-shelter outdoor locations. We also have, I don't know if it's here or not. I think it's all part of this sort of 997 GQ code, but we also have one, people who might live in RV parks or other sort of campgrounds, things like that. There's also 402 hospitals with patients who have no usual home elsewhere. I don't think that's necessarily what the questioner was thinking about, but anyway, those so individuals there would be part of these sort of 997 GQ types. So hopefully that is helpful, answers your question. All right, I think we're just about out of time. So unless I hear any more questions, I can yield back to Greg.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for a great presentation. And it looks like we've covered the question. So this does conclude today's webinar. We want to thank the audience for your participation, and you may disconnect at this time.